Hey everyone, I'm so excited to be back. It's been a couple months. I've been kind of regrouping, and so welcome to the Ninja Homeschoolers. Hiya! We got a little, a new name and kind of a new game for the year. So let me introduce myself. I'm Jill Wolf, a creative learning coach, and I help homeschool parents spark creativity and customize the learning experience in order to challenge and support their child. And so tonight, the title of tonight's live is The Red Pen, Empowering or Paralyzing. Before I dig into it, I want to say a little preview. Next week, I have a new freebie. Next week, I have a new freebie that's going to be released. It's called the 5 Steps to an Amazing Learning Experience, and I walk you through 5 steps to creating really, really great learning experiences with your kids. So that will be released next Thursday, so catch me live next week. But tonight, let's go back to the red pen. Let's talk about this red pen. I don't know about you, but I hated that pen when I was little. I never had a red pen in grade school when I was in, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. But man, I did not like getting papers back with red pen on it. So let's talk about that a little bit. If you're live with me, how did you feel when you got a paper back with red pen on it? Were you excited, like, ooh, I can't wait to see what's on the page? Or were you a little fearful? I don't know that I want red pen everywhere. So what is it? What are the feelings that go with that? I would say this. Most people I've talked to didn't like the red pen. It either announced to the world that, good job. Okay, great, yay. Or it was all over my page and I was embarrassed. I was like, thank you for this neon flashing sign that is pointing out all my mistakes. Now, I know, as an adult, I know, mistakes are how you learn and blah, blah, blah. And that's a whole nother Facebook Live I'm going to do, actually. But for now, let's just say this. Most people don't like them highlighted. But here's this red pen that comes across this way. So I ask, why a red pen? And what's the motive behind putting that all over a student's work, a child's work? I worked with a teacher once who had one of those big Sharpie calligraphy pens, red. Like, this thing was enormous. And when you wrote on it, the letters were like 1/2 inch wide. And it would go through the paper. It was just so, and I asked her, I said, why do you use that on their papers? And she said, I just love this red pen. I love being able to write on there and write notes. And so I tell you, it made me a little nervous thinking, okay, so what's the motive behind writing on our child's papers with red pen? So I ask you this, if it's about power, if it's about I get the chance to let them know, yay, you've done a really good job, or I get to write all over their mistakes, make sure they see them, or if it's about power in any way or control, that's a whole nother problem. Most of the time it's about, I want to give my child feedback. So then let's talk about feedback, and let's set aside a red pen for a second. So I'm going to hit 3 points here on feedback. I'm going to talk about, number 1, what is research, some of the research done about feedback between a teacher and a student. What is some of the things that they found about feedback there. Second, I want to talk about what is it for, what is the purpose of feedback, and why would we give it? And third, how do we still respect our children? How do we respect them as a learner when we give feedback? So those are my 3 things. So number 1, what does research say about it? So let me get my notes here. So they found 2 big things. Number 1, they found that if whatever color pen, if the feedback on the paper in any way, any portion of it represents a score, whether that's a check, whether that's a percentage, whether it's a letter grade, anything that represents a score, then that is the only thing the child sees. So you could have written all these great notes for them, and then you put a B+ at the top. B+ is all they're going to see. So what it was pointing out, right, and what's the implication of that? The implication is if you're going to put a score on it, don't waste your time with other notes. But if you want to put notes on it because your child's going to do something with that feedback, then don't put a score on it, because that score seems to be the heaviest and most weighted thing that they look at, and they don't see anything else. So that's number one. Number two of what research found is that children only read and take in the feedback if they have to use it. So what do I mean by if they have to use it? If you've said you're going to revise this paper, if you've said you're going to have the chance to revise your response, whether it's math or science or history or whatever, if they're going to have a chance to revise their work, then they'll read and kind of take in the feedback. And what does that mean to them? If there is not any revision or any way they're going to have to use it, they in one ear out the other. So that was the second thing. And there's actually a third one. Oh, so let me talk about I haven't done this in a while. So the second one, this one about they only read it, have to use it. So the implication is really don't spend the time putting a lot of feedback on your child's work if you have no intent for them to use it for some kind of revision or a next step, or even just to revise this in your notes, because we're going to refer to it later. But if there's no going to be use made of the feedback, then don't waste your time writing it on there. The third thing is that the feedback needs to be specific. So if it's very general, like great job with grammar, there's nothing that a child can do with that. If it's specific and says you've used the same verb 6 times in your response, try to find a different verb to use in those places. That's much more specific. I can do something about that. So the implication there being that your feedback needs to be specific to that assignment and what you're wanting them to do to improve it. The general feedback is not helpful. So 3 pieces of research. Let me reiterate those real quick. Number 1, if you're going to put a score of any kind, number, grade, then don't bother with the feedback. If you want them to read the feedback because they're going to do something with it, don't put a score. Secondly, there has to be a reason that they're going to be using this feedback in order for them to internalize it. So again, don't waste your time unless you're going to have them use it for something. And number 3, it needs to be specific. So whether it's in red pen or not, these are the things that they found about feedback when it came to working with children. So the second thing I want to address then is purpose. Why would we give feedback? Why, as their homeschool parent, why would I sit down and write out feedback for them on whatever they wrote? The purpose. It must be because they're going to do some kind of revision. Again, if it's just notes, just, remember to check your punctuation. Again, in one ear, out the other, right? So it needs to be something they're going to be using it for. So there has to be something they're going to revise as a result of this feedback. And then number 2, there is two kind of camps, if you will, or categories of feedback. One is revision. That's more about organization and the ideas in it. And the other is editing, grammar, spelling. And so you have to decide what is the purpose of this revision they're going to do, and then give that kind of very specific feedback. And just so you know, I will do other Facebook Lives more specific about feedback, actually looking at a piece of student work, what kind of feedback would I put on this, and we cover this in great depth in my course, which is coming out in like 6 or 8 weeks, so I'm really excited about that. But in general, you want the feedback you give to have a specific purpose. Okay? I'm going to give a quick example of the difference between revision and editing feedback. My sister wrote a book a few years back with a co-writer, and she asked me if I would read it and give her feedback. Well, this was their first draft, 550 pages of a first draft novel. No, actually, it was a very interesting read. However, my feedback was for a first draft, which was very big picture. They had some great little nuggets in how they were telling their story, and some of the ways that the characters related. It was of the vampire genre. This was right after Twilight, really popular genre. And they had an angle that hadn't been done. It was really, really cool. So my data, or my feedback, was very specific to the storyline, the characters, how they were revealed, and how they took some of their nuances and unique pieces about vampires in the vampire world, and how they could make that clearer. I wrote up a big review for her and gave it to her. Well, her co-writer gave it out, and everybody who read it for her did spell check and grammar check. Well, grammar check and spell check is the last bit of feedback, especially for such a big project like this, because if you revise and rewrite, chances are half of what they've just given you spell check data on isn't even in the next draft. So it's kind of irrelevant. So this was just a very different way to give feedback. So I want you to hear that you can do both. It really depends on what am I having my child do with this as a result of this feedback. And so what kind of feedback do I need to give? Okay, so that's the purpose point. Number 3, and my last one, is how do we continue to respect the student, respect our child, or if we have 2 or 3 kids or other kids that are working with us, how do we continue to respect them as learners through giving feedback? And so I would say this. Number 1, instead of scribbling or writing on their work, use Post-its. Now, there's all shaped Post-its nowadays. You can get stars and hearts, long strips. You can get big ones, little squares. But I learned this working with actually another teacher. It was very interesting. I had never even thought about this before, but she said it respects, and I truly believe this, it respects the student's work. That page they did, that they spent so much time writing. And if they're a perfectionist at all, they've rewritten it so that it doesn't have smears and doesn't have erase mark. Okay, so they've spent a lot of time on this piece of work. And even if they didn't spend hours, they've put their heart into this to give me their best. I don't want to just scribble over it. That doesn't feel as respectful as a little Post-it with an arrow. Okay, very simple. That way they can then pull it off, put it back on, read the section. Sometimes when we actually write on their work, we make it so busy with our marks on top of their marks that it's very hard to see what, as the learner myself, it's hard to figure out, what am I supposed to change here? I don't get it. But a Post-it to the side. So that's one suggestion. Try that. You could try that. Second, instead of, so one way is to respect the actual work itself, the physical piece of it. The second is to respect that as a writer or learner, myself, so I'm the child here, I get to make choices about what I am going to change, what I am going to include, what I'm going to write about, and how I'm going to write about it. So to respect that, and that it's really my choice how I'm going to do this, use suggestive language versus demanding language. So instead of change your verbs, or instead of make this 2 paragraphs, use the word consider. Use the word, you might think about, that little phrase. It kind of plants the seed. This is something you could do. Now, I realize sometimes we're worried, well, if we give them the option, we say consider, and it's really polite and nice, that maybe they won't do that. But that's where you have conversations. Say, look, I'm not going to force you to make these changes. What I'm saying is I respect that you are the author of this piece of work. And so I want you to consider that these are some things that could make it better. Now you go with it how you want. It just gives them the freedom to still be the one in charge of their work. And that feels like respect. So, and third, use their favorite color. And if their favorite color is red, great. Maybe a red pencil instead of a red Sharpie, but use their favorite color to write your feedback, even if it's on Post-its. I find that I'm very soothed by my favorite color. I like to read things in my favorite color. So it doesn't seem as scary to read feedback in my favorite color. I know that's psychological, but give it a try. So I have those ideas for you tonight. And so let me reiterate real quick, and then I'm going to give you 3 things I want you to go and do after this live is over. One, I want to reiterate the research, and it says, remember, don't put a grade on it if you want to give feedback and have them do something with it. If you don't, and you just want to let them know, hey, done, here's the score, then just write that. Don't bother then with comments. Number 2, students are only going to read and internalize the feedback if it's meaningful towards some end purpose, or towards some task. So unless you're going to have me revise, don't bother putting it on there because I'm probably not going to read it. Number 3, it needs to be very specific to this piece that I wrote right here, this task. So something general like fix your grammar is okay, where do I start? So, but something more specific is a lot easier to take action on. Okay, so that's the research. Number 2, make sure you have a purpose for the feedback and what they're going to do with it. And in that purpose, if it is intended to be revising the ideas that are on there, then you have big picture kinds of feedback. Don't bother with spelling and grammar in that feedback. Make it either revision or editing. Both gets really confusing. So pick one or the other. And third, and finally, respect their work. They're just crying out, respect my work, respect. I'm putting my best I've got for you here. Please respect it. And that can be done through using something like Post-its. If they're typing it up, there's actually ways to like have little Post-its in your Word documents. Use suggestive language and things like consider and think about and this makes me think of. They aren't demanding language, and then use their favorite color. So there are some things around feedback. I would challenge you to do these 3 things. Number 1, consider how you've been giving feedback to your child. Have you kind of crossed any of these lines that may show a little, and not intentionally, but maybe disrespected a little of their work, or you've made them feel a little crummy or scared to death to get their work back because of what you may have written? Have you crossed any lines that are going to make it so that they're not actually excited to find out what you think about what they wrote because they're excited to take it to the next level? That's what you want instead. So first thing I want you to do is consider how you've been giving feedback and if you've crossed those lines. Number 2, I want you to try to make a change in your red pen behavior, I call it. So some kind of change. Maybe you decide, okay, I'm going to try to use Post-its, or I'm going to try to use suggestive language, or I'm going to try to have us revise pieces. Maybe you don't even do revision. So now we're going to do that. We'll do a first draft, a second draft, and a final draft of a few things. So find one thing that you're going to change of your red pen behavior, and then share it with your child. I want you to know, Mom's going to try this, and here's why. And then let's see if that doesn't make you more excited to rewrite. Maybe it makes you less scared to get back work from me. And then finally, come into the group, Ninja Homeschoolers, and share what red pen behavior you're changing and some of the results of it as you do. I'm excited to hear, what are you trying and how's that working? And it may be as subtle as your child saying, you know, that's a good idea, Mom. I never thought about including something like that in what I wrote. Let me try that. And you didn't have to force a rewrite. You didn't have to, they actually were excited to improve their work because of how you did feedback and what you wrote. So I want to hear all about those. So please come on and share those. If you have any questions about feedback, I know I just kind of scratched the surface tonight about what feedback really is, but it's really the underlying practice under that red pen. So I'm going to say, let's take off that red pen, and any of the kind of red pen behavior, which can be, I think, a bit paralyzing and scary to kids and to your children. And instead, let's put on behaviors that are going to empower them to want to improve their work. I am so excited to get to have shared with you tonight, and I look forward to next week. And look in our group for upcoming challenges and things that I would love to get your feedback on, and next week's Facebook Live. And the new freebie, I'm so excited to share it with you guys. So have a wonderful night, a wonderful weekend if you're watching this tomorrow, and I'll talk to you soon. You can do it.